Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear, and today we're saying goodbye to this. Can I pick it up? Oh. My beloved Akai AX60. I love gear so much, in fact, that I develop legitimate emotional connections with these things. And speaking especially about the old stuff, I love that there was a point in time where these things were contemporary products, and everything that has to happen for them to get designed the way they are and be produced where they are and show up with me in Iowa is extraordinary. And thinking about that really excites me. I love thinking about this almost 40-year journey that brought this specific physical object to me, and for it to still be useful to me and for it to still be compatible with all my MIDI gear or whatever is awesome. And I just get super caught up in how excited I am about that. All those things together, I just get so excited by all of it. And it means that I have a lot of things that I don't want to get rid of. I have a lot of things that I'm actually attached to. And I think my worst example is this AX60, but it has come to the end of its time with me. I am going to get rid of it. I have a Facebook Marketplace deal lined up. I'm going to trade it in part for something else, which you will see very soon, but I'm going to finally send it on its way. And this whole video is in part a way for me to wrap up my time with the AX60, to wrap up my story with the AX60, and to put into one video everything I've been through with it, everything I appreciate about it, and also, talk about why I'm not keeping it anymore and why it doesn't make sense for me to keep it anymore. And this is sort of a new format. Right now, the notes just say the goodbye. I don't have a snappier name, so tell me if you have something. Or the farewell is in there too. But your job, my devoted subscribers and yet to be converted viewers, hopefully this video does the job and you click subscribe. Your job is to tell me what does and doesn't work about this format, what needs more detail, what needs less time, all that. What part of the process you connect with. I want feedback. I have the story divided for my own sake into sort of 3 sections. The story of getting it, what it can do, / why it's unique, / the things that I used it for, and finally a sort of conversation, loose thoughts on getting rid of gear you still like, gear you still care about. And I worry that the format is a little self-serving in some ways, a little more than normal, just to talk about my experience, even though I totally think, and I like to watch content that is just other people's experiences. There's a lot to be gained from that. To really actually give something back. As part of this, I made an MPC expansion pack, and there's a collection of key groups, sampled instruments for the MPC that I made with the AX60. I'm sure you could pack it out into another format if you really care to. That is available to any tier of my Patreon. So thank you to my supporters on Patreon, and the link to that, if you are so inclined to support me, is in the description. Okay, also to improve the viewing experience, because I'm anxious again about the somewhat scattered format. It's still something I want to talk about, and I know it is, but I want to make the viewing experience better, so there will be no mid-roll ads, thanks to our sponsor, SkillShare. Firstly, the story of its acquisition, what it took for me to actually get this and get it working, is pretty much what got covered in my Halloween special. If you have seen Resonant Screams, the first one, I'm not exactly as proud of it as I was when I put it out, but I think it's still fun. I'm way better at every part of making a video now. You could still check it out if you'd like. That is the dramatized story of getting this AX60. And it started, this was one of the first things I bought with my very generic eBay strategy of search for something wide sweeping. So I'll search for synthesizer, filter just to auctions, and sort by ending soonest. And another one had come up a week or 2 in advance, and I didn't get it. And this one I did win the auction. I think it was less than $500. I think it was $480 total. And I bought it because I already liked Akai. I had an MPC. I was passionate about that. And I was already excited about Akai, and I didn't know they had ever made synthesizers. So when this came up, totally sparked my interest, totally sparked my curiosity. And I had also been getting a little bit more confident in my repair work, and I wanted to try something that I knew was over my head. And when it showed up, it was behaving a little strangely. I got it to work a few times, but never consistently. And it was failing in ways that I had no idea how to track down. If you tried to run the auto tune because they're VCOs and you need to manually say, tune these again, the synth would crash. It would stop responding if you tried to run the auto tune, which is not good at all. And occasionally certain voice allocation, and occasionally the voice allocation was weird. It just wouldn't work. And so I tried to fix it myself. I did a little bit of research for some integrated circuits, but I wasn't good at tracing circuits or like big time conceptually understanding what was happening in them at this point. And so I realized I was in over my head, and if I want it to work, I need to take it to somebody else. There are no repair shops near me, but certainly ones that work on old synths. But I was about to go to KnobCon in 2019, and that's over by Chicago. So I called a bunch of places in Chicago to see if they could fix it. I got a lot of rude responses, actually, but I did find a shop that was willing to work on it. So I dropped it off there. That would be September of 2019, with the idea that when it was finished in whoever knows how long, I don't remember what they told me at that point, but they would ship it back to me and I'd cover the cost of shipping. That to me was preferable than having something that would never work sitting in my apartment, or that I would break even more if I tried to fix it myself. But I thought that was it. I thought it would come back to me when it was finished in a few months, but I would call maybe every few weeks, maybe every month, and I heard a bunch of different versions of it's going along fine, and we're just waiting on parts. And eventually, I couldn't get a hold of, I would ask for, I don't even remember his name, but the guy who was working on it, I would call the place and say, is so-and-so there? Is so-and-so working? If not, I'd leave a message. Anyway, it was June of 2020 at this point, and I got a call from the owner of the shop to tell me the employee who was working on my AX60 didn't work there anymore, and they don't have anyone else with the time or expertise to finish the job. And he couldn't tell me what had been done to that point. He really didn't even know. So they said they would send it to another shop, and they would use my diagnostic fee to cover that shipping, which is like totally a raw deal, and I might have been too generous. There was a lot going on, global pandemic, I get that, like no businesses knew what the future was going to be like, fine. But when they sent it to somewhere else, they sent it to Belltone Synthworks, and they're in Philadelphia, I think. I cannot recommend them highly enough. I don't know if they normally take stuff, through the mail, through shipping, but totally sincerely, it was night and day. They were more communicative. They seemed to be more informed as to what needed to happen. Everything was better, and the work got done pretty quick. They replaced integrated circuits that I had replaced because I put ones that were not compatible in, which I don't even remember if I noticed that I failed that or not. But they built a totally new power supply as well, based on specs from another YouTuber. His name was Golt. And I'm totally inspired by this guy. He makes repair content interesting, but I don't think he's uploaded in a very, very long time. But he designed a new power supply for the AX60 to solve the auto-tune problem, which is awesome. And that's what's in my AX60 currently, a totally new board, which is so, so cool. Plus, I paid them to even, I don't know if it was clean or replace the tack switches, but refurbish the tack switches and key contacts. So the AX60, by the time it got back to me right after this, was in excellent shape. Okay, as we swing out of that demo, let's thank our sponsor, SkillShare. SkillShare is an online learning community with thousands of classes that cover just as many different topics. I mean to say thousands when I say that. Is that clear? I wrote that the first time and I liked it. Anyway, it is a great place to learn new skills or grow ones you already have. For us music making folk, there's classes on DAWs, synthesis, working with specific genres, all taught with a structure and a purpose, with no ads, so you can just focus on learning. I brought up the same exact class last time, but I am still slowly making my way through it. Mark from PGN Piano has a class called, I think it's just called 24 plus hours of piano lessons, but he refers to it as the living room piano course, and I like that. I think that's apt because there's a casual element to it, but he's still concise in a way that really, really works for me in the way I want to learn. So if you think Skillshare would be interesting to you, the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare for free. I think that's plenty of time to get started. Find a class that works for you. Find a topic you didn't even know you're interested in. So once again, thank you to Skillshare. Back to the AX60. Okay, that's all of what it took to get the AX60 working and back to me. And I was in a totally different place, firstly, in regards to this whole YouTube thing, but as much as I knew about synthesizers, fixing them and just using them, But by the time it got back, I was even more excited about what it was and what it could be for me. And what I think really, really makes it special, a lot of things, but it's about as late as you can get for a VCO polysynth. It came out in 1986. It uses the CEM 3394, which is the same chip that's in the AX73, which I have had and sold and really loved, and in the Sequential Circuit 6-track, which I am keeping, mostly because it's smaller. And if I can keep a synth that uses the same chip technology in a way, I have part of what makes this inspiring to me. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead when I talk about that. It is just one oscillator, but has some options to thicken it up. You can use a simultaneous saw and triangle, which reminds me of Prophet sounds, which reminds me of the Prophet. But it has a lot of synthesis control and parameters that aren't really common at this point in time. You have pulse width on every waveform, which technologically is just interesting to me. It sounds like wave slicing on everything that's not the square wave, the pulse wave.
What the hell is that about?
You can do VCO to the cutoff, like an audio rate sort of modulation, and it doesn't really even sound like that's what you're hearing. It sounds really brash, especially with high resonance. It sounds really, really bold.
You get elements of FM and elements of FM sounds and elements of sampling rate and like a Nyquist frequency, and it's very weird, even just in overdrive sometimes.
It can do splits. You can have two patches, two different sounds being played at once, which is crazy, and a function of the way the 3394 works. And that as a spec sheet, like, almost doesn't even make sense for an Akai synthesizer. It's just so weird that those are all things they decided to include in it. And that is only somewhat reduced by the controls being bad. The range on a few of the controls just seems like it wasn't thought about. They just used whatever value pots they had, which is a huge shame. But the resonance specifically, it's self-resonating at like 40%. It starts to be like too much before you're even halfway on the control. And that's just silly. Nobody wants to program with something that feels like that. Plus, there's this global, it's not a smoothing or a filtering, but if you move a control really slowly, there's a chance it'll never update. So the way it works, in a certain amount of time, you need to move a certain amount of value away from what the preset is at or what the current value is set at. I don't know if I explained that very well, but if you move very slightly, there's a chance that won't update at all. And if you move really slowly, there's a chance it'll never update. You need to do one quick movement to make the synth realize, oh, this parameter is changing. And that is super annoying for somebody who's really, finicky tweaking like I am. But you can sort of solve that with aftermarket firmware. Tontec is, I think, just an individual, but there's a Tontec mod for the AX60 that requires a bit of circuit board assembly, but you can install this aftermarket daughter board with an aftermarket firmware chip that fixes a lot of those problems and adds a lot of extra functionality. So in my AX60 now, it does have that. If you want to watch the video, you can. And it gives you can do MIDI CC when you couldn't before. You can send the patches out through MIDI over SysX, I believe. All things you couldn't do before. It fixes the relative range, I think, of all the envelope controls, because all the envelope controls have sort of a stupid curve in the beginning. That's solved by the Tontec mod, as well as that, fader not updating until you get a dramatic jump. Those are both solved by that. And I bring that up because that's a part of this that excites me, that it has enough appreciation. Somebody's willing to design a daughter board and a new firmware that make it even better. And the idea that there are so many ways to make these old things more relevant and, overcome some of their missteps, let's say, in, the modern era of musical instruments and prototyping and programmers being everywhere is amazing. And it's so exciting to me, again, that that's part of what I got to do to it. That's part of my time with it. I made it better. I think that's thrilling. I really, really do. Anyway, that was a long tangent, but I talked about all the controls, sort of the sound of the AX60. That VCO to the filter modulation, plus the resonance, plus sort of the dark two-position chorus, plus in some ways the flexibility of the LFO, but really the sound of the filter, which I don't want to say shrill, but it is sharp. And the VCO modulation, VCO to VCF modulation. I want to make scary music. I want to make horror music on the AX60. It wants to be haunting. It wants to be sinister. And that's really what inspired the first Halloween special, but I haven't really had anything else that makes me feel that way. Things have made me want to play or create archetypal, sort of sounds. The Juno works very, very well to do big chorusing pads and things, but never has a tone like that, been clear to me from a piece of hardware. And that is in part a big reason why I want to keep it. I like what it does, and it does something different than anything else I've used. And I don't know if that's me becoming overly sentimental. I don't know if that's me finding a reason to be really excited about this thing, but it's completely true. I want to make scary music on this. And when I needed to make scary music, guess what I want to grab? So I totally recognize I have a sort of non-standard use case for gear with this channel, this whole thing. I have this extra incentive to keep things moving, to keep showing off new stuff, even if the AX60 is, exactly the sort of thing I like to talk about. I've talked about it several times. Here I am doing it another time in a video that probably won't perform well. It doesn't make sense for me to hold on to something that I don't have much of a use for. You know what I mean? It makes more sense for me to sell it and get something else. And I can show you guys another thing. I can just keep the machine moving, keep the channel developing. And if I'm being honest, like withholding the YouTuber thing, withholding the channel, I don't use it enough to have something this cool, this nice, just sitting around. And when I just need a polysynth, it's too unique, it's too characterful for it to be my first choice. When I just need polysynth sounds for something else to demo a pedal to fit in a jam. Because sometimes, and this is again a tangent, when I'm doing a demo of a pedal or with the MPC something to sequence, I sometimes worry that if I pick something so unique, that becomes the focus when I don't necessarily want it to. And maybe I'm thinking too much about it. And so normally when I have a chance even to sit with gear off camera, which doesn't happen much at all anymore, if it does happen, I'm learning for a video that's coming. I'm learning something well enough to feel like I can talk about it, or I'm working with something modern because I'm going to bring that on stage to play songs when I'm performing. So I don't use it enough. All that summarized, I don't use it enough. And that's sort of exactly the premise of the second Halloween special, Resonant Screams Chapter 2. Do I need to call spoilers on my narrative content? Do I need to tell you guys I'm going to spoil the very end of my second Halloween special? I'll just play the very, very end of it right here, because I think I got my point across there. Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear. Today I'm talking about a simple idea, and it isn't true for anybody, but I think it might be true for me. If you have a bunch of hardware and you find there's something you aren't using, even if you like it, you don't find yourself sitting down to play it, sometimes the right idea is to let it go, to pass it on, to free up that money to try something else, to experience something new, and let somebody else feel the same things you felt when you loved that keyboard while you had that keyboard. And I don't mean this in a sad way, and I don't mean it in a noble way, and that was like a year ago I made that. So the realization that, became the entire backdrop for my big creative project for the year, it took me almost a year to really get rid of it. But that really is my whole point here, is there's money and space that I can free up. Even if I love this thing, it's more practical for me in my situation to move it along. So I need to sort of wrap up for myself the sentimental parts of it, close my story on the AX60 and move it along. And that's this. Yes, I love it. Yes, it is special to me. But if I'm not using it often enough, in a way it feels like I'm wasting its potential. I know there are people that could end up with this that would use it every day or use it on every song they make. And that's not going to be me. And it's thrilling to me that whoever I sell it to might be that person. Whoever I give it to next might be the sort of person who has a use case for it every day. And that's awesome. And I'm very, very proud that my step in this decades-long story of an individual object is getting it broken, having it repaired, getting in a place where it can make music again at all, let alone a little bit more conveniently, and then sharing it here with people on YouTube and introducing people to something I care about that they might not have heard about, or teaching people how to use it in a way they hadn't thought of. Then, eventually, Now I send it on its way to someone else who can appreciate it, maybe in the same way as me, maybe in a totally different way. And you know what? I have more of an outline, but I'm not going to read it. I think that's perfect. That is exactly where I want to end. I'm very, very proud of my chapter in the story of this individual object. And yes, I'm totally 100% going to miss it when it's gone, but somebody after me and after them and after them will love and appreciate this thing just like me. And I think that's amazing. I'm very, very proud to have been a link in that chain. My name is Jorb. I love gear that truly, sincerely includes the AX60. I'm really going to miss it. Thank you for watching. I hope to do this again. Let me know if this format is fun or not. I like to be off the cuff like this, and I think people recognize that. So there you go. My name's Jorb. I love gear. Thanks for watching. Cheers and so long. I'm going to play it till I cry tonight.